I had the recent great fortune of having dinner with a bunch of financial analysts. There's better things that I've done with my time. However, they started discussing the 1980s share market crash. And they were talking about the behaviour of some of the analysts during that time, great guffaws and the sorts of things that would never ever translate in business today, hopefully. Their comment time and time again was, imagine trying to get away with that now. And when you think about any industry, it's kind of interesting to take a snapshot in time and say, what could we not have got away with today that we used to do? And I think that helps break down the kind of overwhelming feeling of change, and that we're always changing. The share market and financial analysis is one factor, but so is farming and so is food. Something that I like to relate to this too, is what I call the plastic bag inflection. So for years we've been talking about plastic bags, years and years. We have known that we shouldn't be using plastic bags. And suddenly it tipped and the supermarket stopped producing plastic bags. Who knows what tipped it? There's some sort of sociological phenomenon that's happening around plastic bags, but that inflection point hit and we're not using them anymore. And I think we're starting to see the same thing with some of our practices on farms. I'm not a millennial, as you can clearly see, but I thoroughly enjoyed the millennial presentation earlier on. What's really interesting is, and I don't want to insult you over there, but millennials have a concentration span of 12 seconds. So I've already spoken for about a minute, he's already on his phone. And if you think that's bad, I am the mother of 3 centennials, 3 teenagers, God help me. Their attention span is down to 8 seconds. So those beautiful videos that we put up earlier, gone. 8 seconds. A minute's just way too long for them. Really interestingly though, thinking about the millennial and centennial mindset, I had a conversation with my 17-year-old son. He is a surfer, and as such, he's grown his hair and thinks he's rebelling. He came home and was moaning to me that the rector had asked him to tie his hair back. Heaven forbid. So I said to him, he said to me, why is he worried about such a small thing as my hair? My generation has to cure cancer. We have to deal with climate change. I thought, but I didn't say, well, son, judging by your last report card, it's unlikely you're going to solve cancer. Instead, I said, it's fantastic that you're thinking about these things. It really is. Thank you for waking me up at 2 o'clock in the morning. Now go and tidy your room. But seriously, this generation is going to be purpose-driven. And and I think we've always been purpose-driven, but it's coming out even more. And right down to all of us who are running any sort of business, and it's not just farmers, it's every business is going to be under a purpose transparency kind of film. So how do we make sure that we connect with this generation in terms of purpose? And that means we have to at an employment level as well. If we want to keep this generation engaged in our businesses, then we have to have a purpose about the way we do our business. I read something really fascinating that really frightened me. It was a website called Cause Framework, and what their driver was to find the best types of purposes that these types of millennials and centennials can grab onto to really make a difference. And so what they did was work out how to scale or how to put metrics around a purpose so that you could actually make a difference. So the first metric was it had to be great in scale, had to affect many people's lives. The second was it was highly neglected, so there weren't so many other people working on addressing the problem. And the third metric was that it had to be highly solvable and that resources would do something to create a difference. These are the top 3 metrics this organisation, or these are the top 3 causes this organisation came up with. Extreme poverty, animal suffering, and climate change. It's pretty sobering when you're talking to a bunch of people who are producing animal protein for a living. So what do we do about this? And building again on the millennial story, 2019 has been called the year of the vegans. Where millennials lead, businesses and governments will follow. A quarter of 25 to 34-year-old Americans say they are vegans or vegetarians. And there are things that are on the replacement spectrum. What's really, really interesting, if you hear any of these people, the Impossible Burgers and the likes, talking about where they want to position their food, in the past, vegetarian type products or meat type replacement products have been very squarely in the vegetarian aisle. And they've been okay with that. They're not anymore. They want these products sitting alongside our meat products and challenging them for the consumers to buy them instead. But what is also really interesting is that these types of products have to be under the same transparency lens as your meat products. And it was brought up before, but the Impossible Burger, so the Impossible Burger is a plant-based burger which is trying to emulate the taste of meat. And what they had to do was understand what made meat taste like meat. So they identified that what made meat taste like meat was something called blood. And it was actually the hemoglobin protein that was in blood. So they went and because plants also produce hemoglobin, so they went and scanned a whole bunch of plant products to find out which plant products they could use in their burgers to give it that nice meaty taste. And they came across a soybean root product called leg hemoglobin, and they took that gene and they put that gene into yeast, and then they expressed heaps of this leg hemoglobin and put it into their burgers. And nowhere on that burger did they say that they had a GM in their product until it started to be questioned. And I raise that not because I'm anti-GE, I'm actually reasonably pro-GE, but I raise it because transparency lenses do apply to all of us. And if we make sure that we keep our industries ticking away as we have been discussing today, then we can compete with these types of products. Another interesting product is milk. And replacement milks are probably even bigger than replacement meats in terms of markets. So just in New Zealand alone, in 2017, we spent $52 million on almond, coconut, oat, rice and soy milk in supermarkets, and that was an increase in $12 million over 2 years. I'm forever buying them. I tell my husband it's market research, but they're actually often pretty awful. But actually dissect the milk a little bit as well, because there is a question of what is milk. So this is on the back of a almond milk container, and right in the small print you can see that the almonds make up 2.5% of this product. So my calculations, that's probably a maximum of about 20 almonds in a good litre of milk. It's not very many, and when you look at what they're actually charging, it's pretty expensive water. Really, really interesting as well is that the tableland, so a lot of the almond industry in the States is grown out of California and requires huge irrigation. There's numbers that people are floating around that 1 almond requires 5 or 6 litres of water to produce. Massive irrigation. What was happening in times of drought in California was that irrigation was causing the tablelands to sink down some feet. And so there was a big scandal around, well, actually, we're selling this as an environmental product, but is it really? So every industry is under this kind of pressure. I don't think you need to feel alone. And we do, this is the challenge we have. In this kind of 8-second attention span world, we live in a huge contradiction. And I really liked someone talking before about, I think it was Mark talking about, some of these things are really complex and we keep trying to apply simplistic things to manage them. That is true, but we also need to work out how we can deal with the complexity but make sure that people get simple messages. So we have to flip it out the other way as well. We can't just be crying in our soups and saying no one understands. We've got to work out how to communicate in these sound bites. And so in terms of contradiction, what's really, really fascinating is the World Health Organization is actually predicting that annual meat production is going to increase massively over the next couple of decades. And in developing countries, what happens is that as soon as people start getting any degree of personal wealth, then they tend to eat more protein. We've seen this in China, we're seeing this in India, it's now happening in Africa. Our business, we do a lot of work now in developing countries, and one of the guys was telling me about the stunning story of a woman he'd met in Ethiopia. So she was a farmer, and she had 1 cow. That 1 cow was 13 years old. No, the cow was older, but that one woman had had 13 children, okay? This 1 cow had put the proceeds of the milk and the progeny of that 1 cow had put those 13 children through school and had also built this woman a house. She understood the value of livestock. We have forgotten in the Western world the value of livestock, but there are many people who understand its value, both in terms of personal wealth, but also in terms of personal nutrition. And if anyone is really interested in this kind of work, then there's a really interesting book just come out by Melinda Gates. And some of the work they're talking about that we've been working with on a project in India is about the protein and these types of products just being hugely important for family health. So there's this kind of dichotomy. We've got the Westerners shirking meat and developing countries saying we want more because we know what it means for our health and for the good of our families. And then I read this quote and it seemed to capture everything that I was trying to get at. So I'm going to read it to you. It's a bit long, but it's from Philip Linbury. We need to go beyond an isolated approach, not just looking at the technical problems around welfare, not just looking at the technical issues around the environment, not just looking at food security in isolation, but putting all of these issues together. Then we can see the real problem that lies at the heart of our food system, industrial agriculture. Now, none of you people are industrial agriculturalists. It's quite a good feeling, isn't it? And if I think about the type of food I want to eat, it's not these types of chickens. And it's not beef that comes from farm lots. And so when we're talking about carbon footprints and things, we have to start thinking about how we look at these problems with a different lens. So from that, when I think about the dairy industry, it is a small industry. But really magically, it's what I would call a boutique industry. And for any of you who like shopping, like me, you'll know what boutique means. So boutique means original, right? Maybe a bit funky. But for some of you who read the visa bills, it generally means pretty expensive. So that's the kind of space that the dairy industry wants to be in, boutique. So if we put that lens to it, then apply that to the millennials and what the millennials want again. So this is really interesting as well. Millennials don't have any money. And they don't have any money because they can't afford houses and so forth. But they don't. What they do want to do with their money is not buy possessions in the same way that we might have. So they don't want Tiffany's bracelets or designer handbags. Really interesting, they don't want lager and they don't want to eat cereals either, apparently. This comes from Damien McLaughlin, who's a professor at UCD Dublin. Millennials want to go to Africa. They want experiences and control of the things they can control. So they can't control climate change, so they want to be able to control the things they can. So what does that mean that we need to give millennials? Millennials also don't want fine dining anymore, so it's shifting. They want food as an experience. And they want that sharing, the whole sharing platter that's starting to happen. So when we start to think again about this with a lens of a food producer, what kind of food are these people going to be wanting to eat? And then on top of that, this is what I find really exciting. If you start pulling all the threads together, millennials also want, so we talked about going to Africa, they want those travel experiences. They want us to have authentic experiences, people were talking about yesterday. They want to be on beautiful outdoor landscapes like this and catching and eating these types of beautiful foods. And they don't just want to eat the loin, they want the whole food experience. I'm going to talk a little bit about carbon now because I think it's really, really important, given the attention that it's getting. And the idea I'm going to put forward is something a colleague of mine came back with after attending a Rabobank conference, and I think it's very, very cool. Okay, so if you're thinking about the way you farm, we talked about marginal land before, essentially what you're doing is converting inedible cellulose into beautiful, nutritious protein. That's got to be a good story. And if we started to look and measure our land use by its nutrient value, what could it look like? Okay, so cow's milk has a higher carbon footprint than soy milk, but it has far greater nutritional index. And actually, if you look scientifically in the scientific literature, I found when I was trying to actually get nutrient data of comparative milk products, I found one. Why are we not doing this? Really basic science. Okay, so we know that cow's milk has greater nutritional index. So if we shift the index, where does that sit at? Beer has a similar caloric index to cow and soy milk, but a nutrient density index of 0. Sorry, people. So on a level playing field, what does the world need and what should we produce? What does venison look like compared to the ubiquitous, awful, high fructose corn syrup that is prevalent in our diets? These are the kind of indexes that we should be starting to create. And I totally agree with what Tony was saying before. We need to start putting the quantitative data behind our products in a layered type system so the consumer can see it quickly in that 8-second flash, but if a consumer wants more information, they can go in behind it and see there's some really good quality science. And then alongside of this, and I've been harping on about this for years, so sorry if people have heard it before, but food as a medicine is one of our biggest growing food trends and one of the most exciting things that we as Kiwis could be getting in behind. And I'm a geneticist, so I understand about what's happening in the world of human genome research, and we are soon going to be getting our human genome sequenced in a very short space of time. We'll know what diseases we're up for, and we can then plan diets accordingly, or we'll have our diets planned accordingly for us. If you walk up to a fridge, sorry Anna, you've done no exercise today, you must not eat that cake. But seriously, this is the type of personalised food and personalised medicine that we can be positioning for. It's actually incredibly exciting for a country who produces really highly nutritious food. And the products as well are really important. So offal products, I think there's an incredible potential in offal products. As I said before, it's not just the loin type products. We need to be starting to think about how we can be creative about offal products. This is a really cool New Zealand company called Pure Foods. They were brothers, or they are brothers, and they got into this business because their stepfather had throat cancer and he couldn't swallow. And he was a real foodie and was horrified at the kind of baby food that he had to eat. So what they did was produce a company of gourmet food that was easily swallowed by people in those types of positions. And if you look at things like the rates of dementia and some of those things where people start having swallowing difficulties, these types of companies are what we need coming out of New Zealand more and more. And really my last couple of slides, the wellness economy. So the Labor government's about to put out a wellness budget. Wellness is the key word for our time. It's a multi-market mega opportunity, and what's so exciting about it is that we fit all the pieces. So what's really interesting about the wellness, it's not just food, it's not just the exercise, it's putting it together. It's experiences. So there's wellness tourism, there's food tourism, and it's all around this whole concept of what I'm eating does good by me and by the environment. So how do we tap into this incredible mega opportunity? I think it's pretty exciting. So in terms of putting it all together in one final slide, what essentially we need is to put the package together, and all the elements are there. And I know the meat companies are doing an incredible job on getting some of these messages across. But we also need to do more R&D around supporting the product itself, both in terms of agronomic and environmental, in terms of supporting what you have to do on farm, welfare clearly, and nutritive value. We need to work how we create those experiences and those product offerings and celebrate our really wild and unique backyard. And finally, for our environmental positioning, the plastic bag is hit. We cannot whinge. We've got to come up with our lens which presents our industry at its very best, and we've all got to do our piece around carbon and nutrition. I think that Dare products can be the ultimate wellness product. Thanks.
That is fantastic. We do have a couple of minutes in case someone has a question that they'd love to ask. Perhaps you've just got lots of questions that you want to write down instead of putting your hand up. I'm not sure. No?